Hello everyone and welcome to Cinderful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. Today's video, we're going to talk about the worst rule in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Now, this is probably going to get some flame on people, because, there are people that don't like talking about anything negative about a game and think that a game can have the best rule system ever and there is nothing wrong with it. However, I think it is important that we always look at the rules of every game we play and think about those rules in a constructive manner and potentially look at rules that aren't good for the game or at least aren't achieving what they maybe were put into the game to do. And so in this video, we're going to look at coherency. This is widely regarded by many people as the worst rule in the game. Now, it's not necessarily the worst feeling the game can generate. That may be other things, and we've talked about that in other videos, but without a doubt, this is the worst rule in the game for a multitude of different reasons. So in this video, what we're going to talk about the rule in what it was trying to achieve when it was brought in, because it is a brand new rule for Warhammer Age of Sigmar 3rd edition, what it actually has achieved, and I guess, can we fix it with certain things, or should we just completely bin it? And I guess there are some other things that will spin off as arguments from this as well, and things to consider in maybe how the game can go in different directions as well. I had a really good discussion with members of my local community in our local group chat about coherency and how it sort of works and what it does and doesn't do, and maybe how we can fix it. So with that all said, let's get cracking in and let's discuss coherency today. And so let's talk about what exactly, first of all, coherency was meant to do. So I think there are three main things that this rule was meant to do when it was brought into the game. The first one is stop conga lines. And what we mean by conga lines is lines of single models stretching out and covering armies as giant screens. You could do this by placing one model, then having your inch gauge, and then the next model, and then an inch gauge, and the next model. And just do this with many armies, providing so many layers of screening to your army that your opponent just couldn't punch through. This really hurt Alpha Strike lists and a bunch of other things in the game. However, this change to coherency didn't actually stop this. So with the new edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, the game in general, the board size shrunk by around about 23%, meaning we lost almost a quarter of our board. Now, with the change to coherency, all our screens that could do this were 25mm base models normally. And now, if a 25mm base model sits side by side and next to each other in a single line, they are still within coherency because 25mm bases are less than an inch. So this means your models are always within two other models, even the models at the end of the line, because they're next to the one they're touching and the one after that one. So in this sense, we didn't actually stop conga lines, we just reduced them. And with the overall board reducing 23% and our conga lines only reducing 50%, we didn't actually get an overall very large change to how conga lines work. Now, this did hurt other models though in other ways, and it actually hurt a lot of other models in more serious ways as well, but we'll get onto that in a sec. The idea, obviously, with conga lines is they wanted to keep units in smaller bubbles. They wanted these units to look like units. Much more similar to, I guess, how they do it in Warhammer Fantasy, how you had ranked up blocks of troops. We wanted units to fight in not necessarily blocks of troops, but formations of troops near each other. We didn't want armies to be able to zone out the table, which was a major thing that conga lines could allow you to do. This could allow you to stretch units across the table, stopping your opponent being able to deep strike and bring units on the table, bring in reserves, or even just completely zoning out objectives and zoning out parts of the board from your opponent's basic sort of movement. Was definitely something you can do. And in general, thanks to conga lines not really being changed, and that we still have this rule where we can spread out our unit quite large anyway, it hasn't really done that either. And so, what exactly has coherency done? Well, first of all, it's made base sizes matter more than ever. This is just incredibly important. Base size has always been something that's been really important to a unit. None more so than the more recently updated to a 2-inch range Namati Thralls. The literal thing where we saw the initial rules for the Thrallmaster come out and we're like, cool, these are all really good buffs to Namati Thralls, but if they don't have 2-inch reach, all those rules were literally worthless because it is that 32mm base size that has stopped Namati Thralls ever being, I guess, a competitive or even a decent option in non-competitive play for Idoneth Deepkin. With the change to coherency now, it has become incredibly important on base size. If your unit is, say, 10 models on a 32mm base and doesn't have a 2-inch reach, meaning they can't reach over each other, then, well, your unit is generally not good in a way in the game. However, it also has stopped certain unit sizes being viable because of how the unit size increases and how coherency is measured from 5 or more models. This means that 6 model units that are relatively expensive have become less viable in game. There, of course, are weird formations you can deploy your units in, but I don't think this is something that was initially intended to be a way around them. You don't want to play in these weird sort of paw print or weird 3-pronged looking triangle movement values that all look absolutely horrible on the table and take so much time to measure up during the game. We were trying to stop conga lines, which we thought weren't representing the game properly, but these weird formations don't do a better job of it, and in fact, I would say look worse in general on the table when you're looking at the game. At least with conga lines, you can see the lines of troops screening out. With this, it just looks like all these weird formations, and they don't look, when you've got 3 cavalry models facing off, looking in 3 different directions, and the 3 next to them are looking in some slightly off directions as well, and every model's facing a different way. It doesn't look thematic to me, where, a line of 10 cavalry looked fine. And a big thing for me as well that this has really affected in the game is piling. Piling, you can get all these models in combat. There are certain ways of zigzagging your troops to get those in, to get everything in, especially with those 32mm bases as mentioned. However, it does increase the time that you have to spend doing this by a lot. Piling and the change they made late 2nd edition to just piling in as close to the closest enemy unit, and even the change they made in the new edition where you can pick which unit you want to do it to. You just pick one rather than being able to be tagged and all that. They undid all that by having these coherency rules like they did, because now you've got to spend all this time making sure, well, this model was already touching, so he can only slide along. This model moves in, trying to get the most. It has incredibly increased the time for piling within the game and made it a much more tedious affair than otherwise it was. If they kept the changes and had coherency out, it would have just been, cool, move my models in as close as I can. I move everyone 3-inch. Done. It's now no longer like that. So with these in mind, and what coherency set out to do and what it's actually doing, I don't actually think it's fixed any of the problems it has. It maybe has slightly decreased the size of screens, but with points rising, we need less screens in a game anyway. So I don't think it's actually done all that much change. So let's talk about how we could fix this. Now this is whether or not, I guess, the game actually needs this fixing, or it should straight up be removed. For me, there are 3 solid fixes, I think, to coherency. Now, all of these are varying degrees, and I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on what their thoughts on what should happen to coherency are in the comments below. Now, the first one is just remove it completely. It has not done its job at all, so is that a case of, rather than trying to fix something, do we just remove it and see how we are without the rule being in play? I do think this is a valid way to fix it. Just completely get rid of the rule. It hasn't worked, so why... Do we need to try and fix it, or do we just go, well, it hasn't worked, put it in the bin? And that is, I think, a very valid option for it. The other one is increasing the minimum size to 11 models. Currently, it sits at 5 if you have more than 5, so 6 model units and stuff like that. Should it be more than 10 that you have to abide by this? This would mean that, something that is a 1-inch range 32mm model unit can deploy 10 wide, and they then count as being in coherency. So this would also help things like cavalry in the game as well. And I guess the issue with this one is, well, there are some units that maybe could abuse this, but a lot of the cavalry units aren't battle lines. So the max you're going to see is, maybe 9 gore grunters could fall in a line, but since they have that is their maximum size, so they never get bigger than 9. And a lot of cavalry units that are 3 models generally can't be battle line. We could have things like 9 vanguard, 9 gore grunters, but they're going to take massive points cost out of armies. I don't think they're actually going to become a problem in the game, having units of those size available to be used in, flat lines. The other fix I have is potentially, do we make it work around unit leaders? If you played things like Star Wars Legion or Conquest First Blood, your unit leader moves and then your troops fall in around him and have to apply it within a radius. The issue with this is, I guess, if it is unit leaders, so unit champions, then there are units in the game that can pick out those champions and remove them and thus break your coherency. So should it just be a model instead of the unit leader? This is also a valid option. Now, the other thing I want to talk about in this is, should coherency be ignored for the purpose of combat? This would actually make the current rules, I guess, okay. If for coherency, it doesn't matter in combat, and you get a free reform to bring your unit into Coherency after combat. It could be an interesting way. Now, if you're overextending that, you could potentially, with movement and all that, lose models at the end of a combat if you can't bring into Coherency. Maybe that's a negative, but maybe that's also just mindfulness of how far you stretch your unit. So I think these are all valid options to fix Coherency. Definitely getting rid of it, increasing the minimum capacity, or making it work around a centralized point within a unit, whether that's a champion or just a single model that you get to pick. What are your thoughts on Coherency, though? It is definitely an interesting thing for the game, and I am honestly not a fan of it. I do think it is the worst rule in Age of Sigmar, because unlike other rules that I maybe don't agree with, it's not actually serving a purpose in the game at all, other than generally, most of the time as we've seen, causing problems with time and just lengthening the game in ways it doesn't need to be, because it isn't actually solving the problem that it maybe was put in to achieve. Let us know your thoughts on Coherency down in the comments below. Well, that's the end of the video. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below and let us know what you enjoyed about the video. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel and turn those bell notifications on so you don't miss a beat when we upload new stuff to the channel. Lastly, if you'd like to help support the channel in another way, you can do so either by helping support the channel on Patreon or YouTube members. This allows us to continue to make new content for the channel, exploring other game systems outside of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, like we have started to with things like Elder Scrolls: A Call to Arms and Conquest: The Last Argument of Kings and Warhammer 40,000. And it helps us just continue to make more Age of Sigmar content as well. Thank you to, though, everyone who has helped support, and we'd like to give them all a shout out to our patrons. First of all, Christian Weir, James Soren, Greenskins Gaming, AJC, Kenny Lowe, Outer and Shop First, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, The Rising Ape, Cure Dynamic, Agu, Anthony B, Anton Nilsson, JJ Austrian, Average Wargamer, Domir, Mark Harvey, James Cater, and Samuel. And to our YouTube members as well, Green Roots Gaming, Kenton Young, Chris Wallace, Ronya, Vinny Lockloric, The Johnny 84, David Ellsworth, Revenar, Wolfric Nick, Broken Chef, Sean Scott, and Diplomat. And a special thank you, of course, to, first of all, Lady Witchfox Art, who does all the amazing artwork for the channel you see here, and to Xmorphic, who does all the awesome background work on our Discord server, keeping that nice and running properly for us all. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Once again, stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against Grey. Ciao for now.